It is chilly out there, so I decided to reach out to Twitter and get some unpopular opinions, some spicy comments, and some hot takes of whatever it is that you guys had on there. So all of these are from my Twitter account, if you're not already following me on Twitter, so that when I do these call-outs, you can call it out. Do so. Notes, reviews, super easy. Usually I have a Taylor Swift icon. It's not that hard to find. I've left all that down below, so have at her. These are just my reactions and my takes on some of your hot takes. And yeah, we already know who started this off, so I just like to continue it with a little bit more of a progressive rock aspect, because that's what you guys come here for. So let's dive in. Mike Portnoy is better off creatively without Dream Theater. So 1, Transatlantic album / 2, soon to be 3, with Flying Colors. 3, Neil Morse bands. 2 Winery Dogs, 1 Sons of Apollo, and a host of other collabs. As much as Dream Theater needs him, the last thing he needs right now is Dream Theater. I agree. I full-heartedly agree to this. I think Mike Portnoy made the best move for himself creatively and career-wise by leaving Dream Theater after Black Clouds, because I feel like after he left Dream Theater went into a rut, and he kind of saw that happening. He saw what was going to happen, and he said, no, let's take a break, boys. Let's, try something new just to reach out a little bit. And a hiatus was probably going to be the best bet for them, but they continued to soldier on, and they essentially did exactly as Mike Portnoy had predicted that they would. Just stagnating a little bit, not doing all that new creative stuff. But for Mike Portnoy, it has blossomed into a really well career, like especially filling in for other bands. There's a meme going on right now of Mike Portnoy taking over different bands, like, oh, a band doesn't have a drummer, Mike Portnoy is there. But yeah, I think it has allowed him to really stretch his legs, especially with some of the proggy albums like Transatlantic and like the Neil Morse Band, and as well as like different genres like Sons of Apollos and Winery Dogs, and even when he was a little bit with Big Elf and Avenged Sevenfold, being more of like a straight up metal or hard rock bands, and then going right into pop with Flying Colors, really stretching his legs in that sense. So definitely a very good move creatively for him. Very similar to that last comment, The Similitude of a Dream from the Neil Morse Band is better than any Dream Theater album. Although not groundbreaking and original, it is best epic concept album written to this day. The themes, the compositions, the writing, and the flow is the best Prog has ever seen. I mean, I don't think it's fair to compare the Neil Morse Band with Dream Theater, even though they are kind of setting out to do pretty much the exact same thing. They are two different beasts, but I'll still agree with this. It is 100% true. When you look at it on paper, both the Dream Theater albums that have been released lately, as well as Similitude of a Dream, they're both kind of suffering from the same things, but here's the difference. Like, both are not necessarily all that original or groundbreaking. The concepts have been kind of played before. The Similitude of a Dream is actually a really fun listen to from start to finish, even though it's quite lengthy. It's a great listen, and there's no real down point. Each movement is very enjoyable, and I really get into the grooves. Like, there's a lot of great energy that's going on there. There's a lot of great compositions, whereas Dream Theater has the same thing, but they're just not as enjoyable. Like, the self-titled work and the Astonishing, just they do the same kind of things, but they're not as enjoyable to sit down and listen to. So I guess the real test of this comment will come about in a couple of months when The Grand Adventure from the Neil Morse Band and Distance Over Time from Dream Theater are released. Like, both are kind of set up, and I'm excited to see how they both kind of turn out. Definitely The Great Adventure has a lot more writing on it for me. Like, it's got a lot more of expectations, just because it is a follow-up to Similitude. Whereas Distance Over Time has a lot less. So there's a lot less like writing on it, because I don't really care at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how this all falls out. The Yes album by Yes is the band's most tangled, anticlimactic, and directionless 70s album. None of the tracks are instrumentally captivated. Their 8 to 9 minute runtime is not justified. Should never be recommended to prog newcomers alongside Fragile, Close to the Edge, and what is that? The FTO. I don't know what that FTO is. I should probably know. TFTO. TFTO. What is that? Now I'm trying to think of through all the Yes albums, which one is recommended by TFTO. Anyway, I'll address this. I disagree. I full-heartedly disagree. The Yes album is a masterpiece, and it showcases a different side of prog. Like, a prog album doesn't necessarily have to be all this epic. It doesn't have to be all this, like, in-your-face bombastic, just blow down the doors. And I know I use that quote quite a bit, but sometimes a very catchy, very fun album is what gets people into prog. Like, this album holds, I've Seen All Good People, which is a great introduction to prog. It's got 3 different distinct movements to it. Each movement has its own identity. I mean, to say that those longer stretches of songs from the first side, like Yours Is No Disgrace and Starship Trooper, don't have payoffs, that play out of Starship Trooper is one of the finest constructed pieces in musical history, as well as Yours Is No Disgrace having that, like, playing around with songs and the jam session that goes on within that. And The Clap is a really fun track that really showcases what Steve Howe is capable to do within his guitar work. I will say that The Venture and Perpetual Change from the second side might not be the best work that the band has done, but Perpetual Change, where it goes into that jam session with that do 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 do, and it like moves over to the one side, and then you have the other one coming through with that dun 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 dun, like just the blending of sounds on that, really great work. And I would have absolutely no problem recommending this album to anybody that's looking to get into prog, and it might be a great way and a better way to get into prog without having all that, you know, the musician's head stuck up their ass is kind of an idea. It's just a great treat, and I would recommend this and Fragile as probably being like the 2 albums to get into. Yes, My Chemical Romance's Black Parade is a prog album. Now, I love this album. I love Black Parade. It might be my favorite album from theirs, but a prog album, I don't quite, like, I can see the comparison because it is kind of a semi-concept album. If anything, Killjoys, the one that came out afterwards, is more of a prog album because it continued that stretch. But we're starting to run a little bit of a slippery slope in terms of what is or isn't a prog album. Like in my mind, American Idiot and 21st Century Breakdown from Green Day are a little bit more of a prog album than My Chemical Romance's Black Parade, but I can see where the comparison could lie. But I think if we drew a line in the sand and said, like, here's where the prog albums start and here's where the prog album ends, I would put My Chemical Romance just on the end where it isn't. They're definitely more of a, like, pop punk emo group that used prog elements but weren't necessarily prog, if that makes any kind of sense, but I wouldn't call it directly a prog album. Night at the Opera is overrated and Day at the Races is underrated. So I'm going to agree and disagree with this. I'm going to agree that Day at the Races is criminally underrated. Just the Millionaire's Waltz alone, it's a great track. Day at the Races doesn't get the love that it deserves, but on the other hand, it doesn't really have a lot of like those banging singles and that banging oomph. It's a little bit more of a melodic album. It's a lot less of a like radio-friendly play. Like, it doesn't have I'm in Love with My Car. It doesn't have Death on Two Legs. It doesn't have like a lot of those really meaty tracks, and it doesn't have Bohemian Rhapsody, which bleeds right into Night at the Opera is overrated. Yeah, no, it's not. It is not. It deserves every single shed of praise that it gets. Now, it probably deserves a little bit more in the fact that the Prophet song doesn't get some of the love that it deserves, because that's my favorite track off of the album. But yeah, it deserves every love that it gets, because it really showcases all the different facets that Queen have. So I enjoy Steve Wilson's solo albums and band better than Porcupine Tree. I don't really think this is an unpopular opinion at this point. I think we can all kind of come together and agree that he's doing some of his best work now. Not to discredit anything that the Porcupine Tree has done. I mean, they revolutionized a hell of a lot of music. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily an unpopular opinion. And even somebody has commented, Brandon Wood did say, I feel like that's most people. But, I mean, it's a great opinion to have. It's definitely valid. Kind of coming into that as well, Steven Wilson's Insurgents, or Insurgents, I always pronounce it Insurgents, is easily his worst solo album to date. Apart from Harmony Korine, Veneno, and Significant Other, there's very little on there that can be honestly compared with his finer works. Too much monotonous droning and too few memorable melodies. I will agree that it is his least best work, and I think most people will agree that it's his least best work. I think it's a little bit all over the place. I don't think it has too much of a cohesive direction of where he wanted to go. I think it was just him freeing himself from the constraints of Porcupine Tree at the time and just trying his own little thing. And sometimes you really do love that monotonous droning and just kind of that sound rock that not a whole lot of bands had been able to capture successfully. And I mean, this kind of rides that wave of, was it really all that successful when it's all over the place? But I have a soft spot for it. The particular time in my life when it came out, I really needed something like this. So yeah, it's his less best work, but yeah, I think I'll leave that one there. Weezer's Make Believe doesn't deserve nearly as much shit as it gets. Sure, Mr. Black Album Counter, with the Weezer display picture and the Weezer banner there with the description of counting down the days since May 25th, which is the day Weezer was supposed to release the Mythical Black album. I mean, I'll just do a little bit of a flashback to my Andrew WK review. So, it kind of solidified for me that I knew that I was in a very different world than a lot of my peers. They were listening to this or Linkin Park or Rage Against the Machine or Weezer, and I'm like, yeah, that's not really for me. Welcome back from that little flashback. Yeah, so I'm not a big Weezer fan. I don't really have much to say about Weezer. I didn't even know they put out a Make Believe album because, yeah, I think outside of, the Green album, the Blue album, and Plinkerton, I haven't really heard any Weezer stuff. It's not my jam. I listened to a few of their albums, and I'm like, yeah, no, not for me. So I guess your opinion's valid, I guess. I don't know. This is something that's outside of my domain. But it was one of the last ones that people had commented on. So I figured, I'll include this. So, yeah. I think I'm going to leave it there. What did you guys think? What are some of your unpopular opinions, some hot takes, and some spicy comments? Leave all those by commenting down below. Love doing this. I'll do another call out probably in the next month. Be sure to follow me on Twitter so that you can respond to that, so I get some really good discussions going on. And yeah, I think that's about it. So, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out!